Welcome to CTV News Trendline with Michael Stittle and Nik Nanos.
Nik, the Liberals and New Democrats are holding their caucus retreats, trying to go over their top priorities for the year ahead. Housing is a major issue facing the country. You've done a survey on how Canadians feel about how well the federal government has done in making housing more affordable. What did you find out?
Not so good, Michael. Not so good. You know, in the survey that we did with Bloomberg News, we asked a pretty straightforward question. How would you rate the federal government on creating policies that make housing more affordable? A whopping 2%, that's 2% say very good. How's that? I'll keep going, but it's not much better. 6% good, 23% average, 27% poor, 39% very poor. So only about 8% of Canadians give a thumbs up to the federal government on policies that make housing more affordable. And, you know, the Liberals have been trying to engage on this topic. It's a provincial responsibility, but they've been trying to engage on this because they're just getting hammered by the Conservatives on this. And not a good score so far. I guess maybe the positive news for the Liberals is that maybe the numbers can only go up because they're so low. But the bad news is that there aren't very many Canadians that think they're doing a great job on creating policies that result in affordable housing.
So an uphill battle, clearly, Nik. And you said again, it's a lot of housing is a provincial responsibility, but there are federal policies that can be enacted. And you also ask Canadians what sort of policies they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, we tested on a bunch of things on what might help make housing more affordable. At the very top of the list was more public housing. You know, basically, build more public housing that's affordable for Canadians. Perhaps that's something that the federal government could invest in if they decided to go down that path and help provinces and municipalities together create more public housing. After that, reducing immigration. That's firmly in the purview of the federal government. And you know, so reducing immigration was up there, help somehow reducing mortgage rates. That's the Bank of Canada. Speeding up approvals for stuff, that's at around 14%. That's directed mainly at municipalities. And even stuff like reducing Airbnbs were ideas that Canadians thought could probably altogether help make housing a little more affordable than it is right now.
Nik, we haven't seen too much come out of the retreats yet. There was a cap on international students announced by the Liberals. What are you expecting here? I mean, how could they kind of hit the reset button here and plan a year ahead?
I think it's more than a hit the reset button, Michael. I think it's smash the reset button. I don't know how you can up it, but you know, this isn't a let's just reset. That won't be enough because, you know, basically the Liberals are fighting a trend line that has been working against them for a number of months now. You know, the other thing that's interesting out of this cabinet retreat is that it looks like the Liberals want to talk about issues that the Conservatives have been talking about, or at least talking about them a little more. You know, affordability, Canadians paying the bills, housing affordability, that kind of stuff. So I think that's probably welcome news for a lot of Canadians because they want to hear about those issues from all of the federal party leaders and the federal political parties. So good news on that. But the thing is that Pierre Poilievre has kind of owned this space from the get-go. It's hard for the Liberals to hone in on this and to break out. But I think the good news is that these are the top issues that Canadians are concerned about. That's what they want to hear from all of the politicians. It looks like the federal Liberal cabinet is focusing on these cost of living issues even more. But it's going to take more than a little reset. It's going to take bold action to try to stop this trend line.
And let's look at the current situation too. I mean, the stakes are pretty high for the Liberals. What's your latest ballot tracking at?
Well, they're still 13 points back. That's not great for any party to be 13 points back. The Conservatives are at 39. They're down 2. Liberals are at 26, down 1. NDP up 3. Like that's still all of that's within the margin of error. So we have to be a little careful. But, you know, with the NDP at 21 and the Liberals at 26, that's only five points between those two. And if that gap closes, what do we say? Jagmeet Singh might have an itchy election trigger finger. I don't know if that's possible, but the thing is if the NDP numbers go up, that's really bad news for the Liberals and very good news for the Conservatives with those vote splits. Bloc at 8, Green Party 4, People's Party at 2. But, the Conservatives still ahead very comfortably. And I'm watching that Liberal NDP, those two numbers, because if they start to narrow, that'll be very bad news. Then again, if the Liberals can pull away from the NDP, they'll be able to get a little bit of a break, at least from a trend line that hasn't been favoring them for quite a while.
And that NDP Liberal governing deal is set to expire next year, so it's coming up fast. So it should be an interesting year ahead. Nik, what about the preferred PM numbers for Trudeau and the other leaders?
Yeah, not much better. Pierre Poilievre still has an advantage. He's at around 32. He's down a little bit, but within the margin of error. Justin Trudeau is back of Pierre Poilievre, and Jagmeet Singh is even further back at around 16% from both Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre. So, Conservatives having the advantage in the ballot, Conservatives having the advantage in Prime Minister on the preferred Prime Minister tracking. So, not good news. And I think, when these trends take place, it takes time to change them. Can they change? Absolutely, they can change. That's all it would take would be for some crazy, weird, blockbuster revelation about Pierre Poilievre to happen. Not saying that it will, but if something like that happened, or if he made a mistake, we haven't seen him make a mistake, then the numbers could change. But right now, Conservatives comfortably ahead on leadership and the ballot numbers.
It really seems like the Prime Minister is struggling to turn things around for himself. Personally, we saw what I guess you could say was an unforced error recently on a expensive vacation to Jamaica. He was asked about that by a reporter recently, and here's what he said.
Next morning, Rika Welsh with the Globe and Mail. You just laid out the tough economic times that Canadians are facing. You say you're seized with the issue. Did you consider that backdrop when you decided to take an $80,000 free vacation?
As many Canadians did, I stayed with friends over the holidays.
Many Canadians don't have access to $90,000 free vacation. So can you just explain a bit more of the thinking as to why you take these vacations and how you think Canadians receive them?
Like many Canadians did, I stayed with family friends over the holidays.
Yeah, not a happy response there. Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch.
It sort of feels like I mean, obviously optics are at play. There's nothing beyond that, let's say, but it does feel kind of like déjà vu here.
Yeah, well, he had other vacations that were, why don't we just say, not like a regular Canadian vacation, right? With the AgaCon and stuff like that. I think what this points out too is, call it an unforced error, or you can call it an insensitivity. It's kind of, just think of it this way, Michael. On the one hand, he has a cabinet retreat talking about how people are struggling to pay for the bills, how housing is unaffordable, and then he stays in a place that for most Canadians, for the vast majority of Canadians, would be completely unaffordable to them. And I think that's the disconnect. And, it's hard really to tell. He has advisors. I would imagine that there might have been some people around the table that basically said, Prime Minister, with respect, maybe this isn't the great time to go on this type of vacation. Yes, go on a vacation with your family, but the reality is any vacation in Canada would have looked better than the one in Jamaica. Especially since the hospitality industry is struggling and the tourism industry is just starting to come back. But I guess the other question is these types of decisions. Obviously, he doesn't really care what people think when it comes to his family vacation. I think maybe that's one of the key takeaways. And, I think if you're just an observer and, I'm not privy to any inside information because we're completely nonpartisan, but when you see behavior like that, you wonder, is that a decision that someone who wants to run for re-election would make? You would figure that if you're running for re-election, you might be adjusting some of these decisions to better align with where Canadians are at.
Nik, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, how a Trump win south of the border could impact Canadian politics here. Nik, Donald Trump had a big New Hampshire primary victory over his rivals. Ron DeSantis has taken himself out of contention, and now we're left with Nikki Haley as his main rival, with South Carolina ahead. It really looks like Trump will be the Republican nominee going into the presidential election. And how is this impacting Canadian politics?
Well, I think it depends on who you are. First of all, there's populist style politics is on the upswing everywhere, right? It's on the upswing, obviously, and strong in the United States. It's on the upswing in Canada, populist style politics. Same thing in France. A lot of countries, the Netherlands, Belgium. I think for the Liberals, they're stuck, right? I'll tell you what I think they want to do. I think what the Liberals want to do is to do a massive drive-by smear on Pierre Poilievre. Basically, they'd love to just say, look at Donald Trump, look at Pierre Poilievre. Don't these things look the same? And to attack Pierre Poilievre. There's two problems with it, and I'm sure this is what they want to do. But there are two problems with that strategy. First of all, Pierre Poilievre has been consistent in his style and messaging from day one, right? In terms of his views of truckers, views on vaccinations. So I don't think there's a hidden agenda there. At least, I don't know, unless there's something else, but I don't think there's the type of hidden agenda that the Liberals would like to have. And remember, he has like a double-digit lead over the Liberals with this style of politics. So that's one problem that the Liberals have. The second problem that the Liberals have is, what happens if Donald Trump wins and they kind of try to do that drive-by smear with Pierre Poilievre, telling him that Donald Trump is a terrible person and Pierre Poilievre is a terrible person, and they both have the same kind of politics. Like, how do you deal with the Trump administration if Trump ends up winning? The answer is you don't, and you can't. So there are limitations in what the Liberals will do, because they might try to score short-term political points. But boy, if they do that, that could poison the relationship between Canada and a Trump administration. And if we thought last time when Trump was president was tough, you could imagine what he would think now if we had a sitting prime minister attacking Trump. And the other thing that you don't want to do is to be a factor in the US election where a Canadian prime minister or a governing party in Canada starts making disparaging remarks publicly about a candidate in the United States. So, but they're probably just dying wanted to do that smear on Pierre Poilievre, but I'm not sure whether it could work, and I'm not sure whether it should be done. And they're going to have to be very careful on both of those fronts.
Nik, while you're talking, I was getting flashbacks to the NAFTA renegotiations. That was a pretty grueling time, I think, for the Canadian government.
Steamroller. We were steamrolled. We were basically told. Now, that said, Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau through that process probably did about as good a job as anyone could have in that renegotiation. But the reality is that Donald Trump decided that it was going to be opened. He decided that it was no longer going to be called NAFTA. And yes, they did accept the Canadian position eventually, but that was very difficult time. And the other thing we have to remember is that time flies, eh? 2026 is 10 years since Donald Trump was elected president. And then in 2026, my understanding is we'll probably be starting the process of reviewing the free trade agreement again. So the timing is actually quite critical for Canada when it comes to who the next president might be, and the renewal or re-examination of the trade agreement. And Biden hasn't been a friend and a buddy. He's been very nice and polite, much more cordial than Donald Trump. But Biden has been focused on a domestic agenda, and whenever U.S. presidents are focused on a domestic agenda, it's usually bad news for Canada.
Nik, what's your major takeaway here in the year ahead, and what it means for Canada?
Turbulence. It's turbulence, Michael. There's going to be a U.S. election that will have an impact on the Canadian election, and the U.S. election is going to be the big news story for the year. We might have a technical recession based on the Nanos tracking numbers, so not a hard recession, but it could be like numerically a recession, and people's economic mood is not good. They're going to be fixated on interest rates and the rising cost of housing, and for any politician, an incumbent politician, you got to watch out that you don't want to get spanked. Can we say that?
Oh yeah.
Is that?
Oh yeah.
Okay. I didn't know what the rating was for the podcast, the adult. Anyways, getting spanked by voters who, don't have a lot to lose if a noticeable proportion of them are struggling to pay for the groceries.
Wow. Let's leave it there, Nik. As always, thank you very much.
Take it easy.